Yeah.
So Roger, just want to thank you for sharing on American Eagle's journey from Excel ERP system to a robust, future-proof, centralized reporting ecosystem. So Roger, why don't you go ahead and share your screen and you can take it away. Well, I was very interested in hearing about what you all are doing with American Eagle. If you're not aware, one of the fun facts that we have on Roger is that, Roger, you shared with me earlier that you were born on the day that Winston Churchill died. Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So I haven't started smoking the cigars yet, although I have had some on occasion. And I'm relatively rotund like he was, but I have a little bit more height to hide it. So otherwise, we share quite a lot of similar qualities. We speak, obviously, the Queen's English and have bald heads. So, altogether, I've got some heritage there, I think. Anyway, yeah, so with that, shall I head off, Dan? All right.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, as you've heard, I'm really talking about a journey that American Eagle have followed. They're actually an amazing company. If you look at the description, it says American Eagle Outfitters, a leading global specialty retailer offering high quality, on-trend clothing. I mean, some of it actually, I thought someone had misspelt some of the descriptions, and it was just because I'm an old fart and didn't know what the particular items of clothing were. But they're not only young in terms of their approach to retailing, they are a real go-getter bunch of people and ready to put in the work to get their systems up to date. So it's been an absolute pleasure to work with them over the last number of years. And what I'm describing here today is really just, to some degree, the first part of the journey. Just the second slide I've got here is really about Qubix. I'll leave that for you to read up, just that we're basically active in pretty much any aspect, all very specifically around a lot of Oracle product, but ERP, EPM, the analytics and OCI and engineering. So yeah, but at the end of the day, we're in this to help the customer. But that's enough. You guys can look at that in more detail as you wish. Let me just, it's not advancing. Okay, so what we did is we worked on this. It was called Project Vision, and this was about dealing with some key issues. Lack of automation of the P&L reporting. You can read these for yourself, but overly complex internal accounts models. But I won't read all of these little segments out. They'll be here for you to look at. In fact, this is already in Slack. But really, the key issue from a technical perspective was that they had all the technology. They had the Rolls-Royce of technologies, both from an EPM perspective and a BI perspective. But what had happened is that the systems had not been maintained and kept up to speed with how the operational functional requirements were changing, because the company is a very fast-growing company. So that's, if you like it, that contextualizes these 5 core items. So what were some of the issues? They needed to be able to look at a brand level P&L, which was not possible at the time. Ability to look at channel level P&L and as how it was being sold. But a P&L by basically digital market or a specific defined area. We're unable to look at P&Ls by customer segment or by product segment, and then the various programs. It's important to be able to analyze by. And so all of these things were not actually available. And in fact, if they did want to do it, it was usually by some sort of a percentage allocation method, and it was using spreadsheets. And I'll give you some examples of those. Dan, can I just check that you're hearing and seeing everything all right?
Yep, it's going great, Roger. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yep, perfect.
I know it feels so alone when you're in the corner.
No, I just want to, because I did have some problems with my internet earlier and got kicked out. So, all right. So what were the business drivers behind what we were doing? So, and you'll notice a number of these are common in a lot of projects, but the speed to insight, actually getting the data refreshed and updated so that it was actually timely and relevant. Insight to action, basically giving people the power to be able to take that insight from the data and be able to make a decision. Increasing accuracy. Spreadsheets, as we all know, don't come with their own validation tools. And so that was one of the key drivers for this. Getting granular. Everything was at a very summarized level, basically at a GL type level, and not available at product or channel level. And you'll see once I get into the sort of final part of this, I'll be showing you some slides of dimension outlines, which is it could be a bit dull, but I'll try and keep it lively. And then some of it was about mitigating risk. We're finding that decisions were being made on sometimes systems that were not necessarily 100% validated. So the ability to automate so that people didn't spend their lives collating data and having to gather things and create spreadsheets and maintain spreadsheets. Innovate. So actually, once we started to get things into a decent state in terms of dimensionality being relevant to functional use, it was time to start looking at how could we change, how could we innovate, how could we actually make things better. And so rather than just trying to solve current state problems, actually start thinking about future. So predicting in the future, some of this we haven't got to yet. There's an element of prediction that will become available, but is not there quite yet. And then reducing costs. Obviously, a lot of that comes by actually people being able to make the right decisions with the right data. And some of it is actually having people being able to focus on specifically analyzing and making proper decisions rather than collating data. So just to give you an idea, this says current state. It's the old current state. So what happened was we have multiple different data sources. So things coming from allocation models, from the GL, from timekeeping things, from Island Pacific, which was actually where the product and customer and channel detail is, to treasury systems, various aspects of Lawson. The thing was that instead of them coming through a conformed sort of database, you ended up with everything coming into spreadsheets, and then those spreadsheets were often made up of multiple other spreadsheets. So that's why I actually ended up calling it a spreadsheet ERP, which is what I used in the description for this. And actually, it was a lot of work for the team, for the internal team, to be able to manage these things. So you can see there were also a plethora of different ways of representing the data and distributing the data. So there was Essbase, there was planning, Cognos. Other people were taking, because they weren't happy with necessarily the veracity of the data from other places, they were taking direct extracts of themselves from source systems and creating their own spreadsheets. And then there was this sort of ecosystem where spreadsheet is used to source data from another spreadsheet. So you can get the messiness of this is actually really quite real. And the interesting thing is that this is not uncommon. We do find this in a lot of organizations. But this had been going on a while, and the controller and the finance team decided that they really wanted to make an effort and get this sorted. So this isn't just one more example in terms of how things might look. The monthly performance report, it had 14 different data sources. So I tried to get some of the sort of key numbers in here. It actually was trying to combine multiple sources into a single grid. So if you look at this, the one front page, it had data coming in from Essbase, from Cognos, from the Lawson GL, from Treasury, and from the ADP HR system as well. So, so the maintenance and the way to create it as a presentation medium, it was extremely complex. So 7 workbook data sources maintained by multiple people, but not collaboratively, they were independent. 7 workbook data sources were in turn also dependent on other data sources. So you can get this sort of idea of cascading issues in terms of if there was an error in the original source spreadsheet, it could be propagated all the way through to the presentation layer without people really understanding that. All in all, there were about 20 people who touched this performance report during its creation, and around 10 of those people were actually creating the pages in the report. The rest were reviewing it. So it gives you an idea of how complex that situation was becoming. So if I move on, so yeah, I talk about this being a pack of cards. There was so many things wrong that foundationally it was going to cause problems. And you had that typical issue where people were meeting in the boardroom and having different numbers for the same things. So there's no consistent master data methodology. That is something that's in play now, but is not in place yet. Teradata was intended as a data warehouse, but it was inconsistently used, and sometimes the logic for how it grabbed data from the source systems, mainly Island Pacific, was not necessarily maintained very well. Cognos was in use, but it had multiple cubes and people didn't know where to go to get their data. Hyperion Planning was used for GL actuals, and Essbase was owned but not used. And in fact, when we were first on site, planning was described to us as Essbase because they were using the planning Essbase engine rather than Essbase itself. And so you'll see we ended up where we ended up in a little while, as I'll get to that just now. So basically there was no one place for the finance community to get at their data and to analyze it. And I think that you'll see it's not necessarily a 5-minute process to get this right, because it's not as simple as creating a technical solution. People have to learn to actually follow a different process and to actually think of data differently and to be able to functionally work through the data rather than just working with what something technical has given them. So what was the answer? So we took really, I've broken it into 6 key steps. Dan, everything following along still? Just checking.
Yep. So you're still live. Keep going.
Brilliant. Good man. So so we did a process review and implementation. So really the way we did that was actually asking people about their jobs and the decisions they need to be making in their jobs, and then reversing that back into what they were actually using to do that. Creation of a single staging area. Now that is in play. There's actually a change afoot with that, but we've ended up using Oracle, an Oracle database for a lot of this. There was the plan was to use Google Cloud Platform. We found some issues with that. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Agree a common chart. That was huge. It seems like such a silly, 3 small words, but that actually was foundational to us being able to create something that would service the whole of the finance community in one place. So that creating a master reporting methodology, again, that's something that's in place still. And then standardized reporting per audience where possible. So whether it's the C-suite, whether it's operational folk, whether it's people in stores, we needed to find what were people looking for, what were the common reporting requirements, and make sure that the ingredients for those reports appeared in our solution. So, and then obviously it had to be secure and user-friendly. And you'll see a lot of really what American Eagle were very enamored with was SmartView and the use of SmartView. The problem was that the models that they had been interrogating to get their data had not kept up with the operational need. So moving on. Just a little bit about, and I'm not going to go through every single line here, but in terms of the process review, it really was focusing on prioritizing which data sources were required to provide the maximum coverage for our audiences. And then we broke it into short, medium, and long-term view. So the initial focus, for instance, ended up being on Lawson data for the GL and on Teradata, which was essentially processing the Island Pacific product customer channel type data. We had to agree cadences for data refresh. How quickly did they need to see it? Financial data, definitely we needed to happen every night and sometimes intraday. Other data in terms of sales planning and long-term planning, we could afford for that to be, for instance, a weekly refresh. And then designate which sources would be used for metadata designation. So all in all, you can, as I said, I'm not going to read it all, but there was a need to create a master data director position, which again has taken a backward step at the moment, but is certainly in the plan, and a steering committee which is in place, where we have people representing the various different business areas and also people from the various IT areas who get together and discuss how these applications should be maintained in the future. So staging area, as I said, this is something that's in play still, but the concept of having a single truth layer is something that is very important. Now, obviously, there's lots of different technologies for using this. We wanted to leverage technology already owned by American Eagle Outfitters. So that's why GCP was considered, Oracle Analytics was considered, Oracle Database was considered. So, and we've actually ended up rationalizing down to those two. Again, I'll talk about that just now. But basically, how often and the methods for ingestion of the data so that we could make sure that everything was validated and was that the various dimensionality was in place for any new data coming in. So if there's a new product or a new account, that we had a method to make sure that those items were captured and that allowed the application tier to be populated accurately. So the common chart. Now, if you look at this, there was some, if you like, fundamental issues when I was talking about the ability to analyze different types of P&L. And so if you look at this, we were interested in what they should cater for, what this chart of accounts needed to cater for. And the core ones were obviously external reporting. The controlling team and the external reporting had to be facilitated via it. Functional management reporting, and then operational analytics. So, and some of the things, when we started to break it down, they wanted to be able to view and plan as relevant by brand, programs. There's 150 departments, there's about 800 classes, 90,000 styles, and 700,000 SKUs. So there's quite a lot of data there that they wanted to be able to analyze by, depending on the functional area of business that was doing the analytics. And they wanted to be able to do that by all 1,200 stores. Actually, I think that number's grown slightly now again. So, and you'll see they've got, I've got a breakdown there of how those are. But the other core aspect of this is that it needed to be flexible. It needs to be able to cater for future, whether that's adding new brands to the organization, whether it's being able to be flexible to maybe do different analytic views. So the only way to build that so that it was future-proof was to make sure that we had a reasonable amount of granularity in all of the dimensions. So I'm not going to spend much time on master reporting methodology, except to say that it needed both an OLAP capability, especially for the finance team, and we also needed that relational type reporting in terms of staging. Now, we've focused mainly in the first sort of implementations on the OLAP reporting, and actually using OLAP to do some things like allocations, where they need to do basically a P&L by geography, for instance. And those things need allocations, basically taking centralized costs and spreading them out so that you can see a sensible P&L for different areas of the business. Yeah, and we wanted to make sure that there was one place for people to go and get their data, whether it be an actual, whether it be budgets, forecasts, or long-term planning. And so at the end of the day, the tool chosen to do that, the only thing with only technology with enough scale and capability to do that, was Airspace in this instance, especially viewing the existing technology space that American Eagle owned. So here's some of the results. I'm just watching the time. I think I'm okay for the moment. So, sure, I'm totally compressed with my own slide here. Do you like the graphics, Dan?
Very fancy, Roger.
Yeah, totally. So, all right. So we now had an outline where this is the Airspace Master Reporting Cube, the MRC. So if you have a look at this, we still, accounts, period, time series, they were all there before. Things like channel, comp, non-comp, order state, entity brand, they were all new, if you like, mechanisms. We had an entity brand of sorts before, but we've split it out. So you've got entity brand combination, plus you've got then detailed product entity. I'm just looking for some of the more interesting store format, standalone, side by side, those sorts of things. Secondary brand, and you can see there's a lot of detail in terms of additional attribute dimensionality that we were able to build into this cube. So, and in addition to this, and I haven't really showed the dimensionality, we take core actuals from here, pump them into something called MRC alloc, which is an allocation cube, and that allows us to produce all of the allocations that are then used for a lot of the external reporting as well. So this, obviously, I'm sort of blasting you with a whole lot of dimensions there, but you can see there's a whole lot of an analytic activity that can take place in this model now, and it does contain all of the financial data, whether it's an actual, whether it's a forecast or a budget, an AOP, or whether it's an allocation as well. So all of that is sourced from one place now. So it has become, everybody uses the same source, and it has become a single version of truth. I know that's become a sort of a cliched thing, but it's obviously vital, especially when we're talking about financial data. So let's have a look at some of the individual sort of areas. So we've got a standard at the top of the accounts dimension. You've got a standard sort of net profit, operating income, other expenses, and you've got and a balance sheet, and the tax department have their particular alternate roll-ups. But if you look at the KPIs section, about halfway down, just above halfway down the screen, these were all new into MRC, and basically they contain all of the detailed, granular metrics around product, channel, and a customer, and the sort of pretty much all of the detailed sales metrics. And those were brought in from Teradata. So the actual being able to go in one place and look at things is all inherent in this model. The other issue, and you'll see when I get to the product hierarchy, is that we built entity and product hierarchies that, if you like, contain both the summarized GL type data from Lawson, and it allows you to look at also drill down and look at the detailed product metrics, product and sales metrics with the rest of the model. So you can sort of get an idea of the picture that's building up here. Periods was extended down to a week level of granularity rather than just month. And that was especially important for planning and long-range planning, as well as analytics. You'll notice things are broken into spring season and fall season. This model allowed us to get the granularity required. So even though financial folk, looking at your GL type data, were interested in things by month usually, especially bearing in mind that some things didn't actually make sense until each month was closed. Those folk obviously still could look at their data in a monthly level of granularity, but the operational product and sales type folk were able to look at things at a weekly level of granularity. So time series dimension, again, this is because this is an ASO cube. It's obviously using MDX, but we created a time series dimension where you could look at things in the periodic or quarter to date or year to date.
Different cases when this UDA for current from the time series dimension. And then for sales channels, interesting point here also, if people aren't familiar with this, this is the S-base outline view where you can drill down on these different things. That's what this is looking at, and looking at it from an entity brand dimension, taking through that. I obviously don't know the details on this and the different data sources that they have for this. And then Roger alluded to some differences in the product dimension, where this is taking us down to looking at ways of looking at different hierarchies within that, down to class. And the entity dimension is by region, by country, by state, by store. And so you really have a lot of capabilities to look at this by various hierarchies in here, all within the entity dimension in here. I'll just read this. AAO had chosen to use the Google Cloud platform for its central data collection tool. The technology facilitates data collection and analytics of any data type. And this was found not only to be fit for purpose, and Oracle had been used instead for data that was required more speedily, specifically the GL data from Lawson. And GCP still collates data from Teradata and is updated only once daily for this. So using the combination of this. And then they were using OLAP. They own Oracle's S-base. S-base is used for the departmental and functional reporting, and S-base is also used for granular allocations, allowing distribution of central costs by various dimensions, by location, by geography, and S-base integrates that seamlessly with planning, another part of the Oracle stack. And S-base has really become the master reporting source for finance. And the bottom line is users don't feel that they have lost their Excel by using the technology for the OLAP technology for master cube reporting. So this is what it looks like in terms of the staging area for the data design, looking by all sorts of different dimensions of this and for this. And they're creating a master reporting cube. So they're combining Lawson and Teradata sources. It's not true staging area, but integration with planning, reporting, planning financial data and granular product data from Teradata. The metadata is done as part of the integration, and the staging area is used to split the existing planning and Lawson feeds so as to load by different brands. Then the application tier consists of the existing planning applications and the new master reporting application and allocation cube. So then what they're looking at for future considerations, they're looking at the cloud. Everything now is all on-prem, and all the major vendors are moving to the cloud. So AEO has stated it's going to move to the cloud as well. It wants to see the need to maintain hardware and software goes away so they can save on hardware, internal IT costs and consulting, and all the latest features then are in the new cloud releases. So by using cloud, they feel they can benefit from all those releases. For instance, this is some of the stuff that Philippe had talked about in his presentation. They can also move to Oracle Analytics Cloud. Some of the benefits would be a platform as a service. Once the resources are selected, there's no per cost no per user cost. And there's also hosted named user pricing. They can use that. They can turn on comprehensive integrated BI as required for different users. It still also integrates with the Google Cloud and integrates with Hyperion Planning. That can be either on-prem or on the cloud. And you can hibernate the instances not in use. For instance, development or QA instances could then be hibernated, saving on the CPU cost on that. It's something you can't do with on-prem. Once you invest in the platform, you pay for it. And then again, all the latest releases are in the new cloud release. So if you want to be on there, you need that as far as Essbase. And then Essbase can move to Oracle EPM Standard Cloud. It can integrate with planned ODBCS staging, integrate with, include some additional modules which can future-proof AEO, and has built-in dashboarding, particularly planning and extremely user-centric type capabilities. The current functionality can be managed, can use the current functionality to manage and maintain the planning, enhance even more simple, the spreadsheet interface, for instance, and all the latest features. Yeah, Roger, I'm being a virtual Roger. You back?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, so I'm so sorry. I'm going to leave my camera off if you don't mind. I'm borrowing a friend's phone, and she's got
Great.
2 bars of LTE. My AT&T.
I'm on your cloud planning slide. Tell me where you want me to go, and I can move to it.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I mean, I was just really talking about the fact that at the moment they're still using planning. They've moved to 11.2, so they're on the final sort of on-premises release. But their plan is, their IT strategy in the future is to go to cloud, and so that will be both the EPM suite and also, of course, OAC and Essbase 21C. So maybe the next slide. Did you talk about relational already? Oh, thank you. Questions and answers. It looks like you did a great job, Dan.
I can go back to your dimension slides. This is where we dropped you. I just tried, basically, I read the slide and tried to fill things in for you.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I mean, I guess maybe the product slide would be interesting, just to show that.
The product slide.
And yeah. So creating the basically the master reporting.
Yeah, I probably butchered this. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So no, that's fine. Dan, thank you so much for doing that. Anyway, yeah. So here you'll see some things are in sort of a light at the bottom of the tier. We've got light colored orange, and then you've got the dark orange. So the dark orange are the ones that are currently being used. The others are future targets for inclusion. At the moment, basically, we take the Teradata data, which is the detailed product data, that comes in that's Google, it's still using Google Cloud Platform, BigQuery, and you'll notice on the left, we've got the Lawson data and Lawson ERP data going in via an Oracle database instance. But both of them feed into Essbase. We do have a linked MRC allocation cube, which takes data from the main cube, does its calculations, and pumps it back in. So it all still ends back up in the MRC. One thing just to say about this, and this is not to, not to be silly about other technologies, but what we discovered with GCP is it's got some very clever stuff, and in fact it's pretty good value and all those sorts of things. When it came to processing, one of the biggest problems we had is that it couldn't multi-thread. So a process that we can do using an Oracle database instance literally takes probably a sixth of the time that it takes to do with GCP, because we couldn't multi-thread from it. It does actually have a native, it does use the native S-based driver for SQL connectivity directly to the data tables. So it was quite easy to use in a lot of respects. But when it came to actual processing times, we found it just didn't meet the requirement. And so the financial data, which is updated significantly more than the weekly product and customer data, we've moved into the Oracle database. And there's a general discussion on what we use for staging in the future, because we really want one place to do it all. So maybe go back a bit. Creating a good old-fashioned data map with where data was coming from and what was actually needed from all the different data sources. This has actually become sort of a matrix that we've already used for the parts of it that we've built already, but it will continue to be used as we grow the application in line with the needs of the business. If we carry on back, I think you've probably covered the rest. I think that we're probably about done.
I kind of did cover these. These, at least I had bullets that I could read and try and fill in a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. Very good. So I apologize once again for that.
No problem.
I no idea. I mean, even my phone was gone, so I had no way. I couldn't even hotspot it, and I managed to grab somebody else's.
Anything else from the cloud? I talked about how they're moving to S-based on the cloud.
No, I mean that's relevant. I mean the strategy is to move everything to the cloud. So that is what's coming up.
Super. Okay, then we'll open
Roger,
up for Q&A.
Terry, really quick before we start Q&A, Dan, Roger, would you be willing to re-record this presentation so that the guests who want to see it in its entirety would be able to have a clean copy that we can put up on our website and YouTube?
Of course, yeah, we can make a plan to do that sometime. Of course.
Wonderful. So everyone can watch for that. Thank you, Dan. Go ahead, carry on.
Thank you.
So let's see, for the live audience that's hung with us, any questions we have in here in Q&A. I see a few things in chat, but I think I'm looking for anything that are in QA specifically to this presentation.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
No.
So, all right.
Roger, one question I had for you that occurred to me, and I was going to actually pump it into the Q&A widget. It looked like you had brand and brand 2 and real brand and some of that. Did they look at combining that into one dimension? It looks like brand is obviously very important to this customer.
Yeah, we did. We ended up splitting them into different things because they actually will look at brand within brand. So they needed to cross pivot them. Yeah, it ended up being, and also because the way they view brand changes from time to time, it was deemed that having the separate dimensionality was going to give them more future-proof capability if they changed, those categories of brand.
Oh, interesting. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Roger, for sharing that. Sorry about the issues, but in presenting, but it's very interesting in terms of hearing about what you had done with that client. So with that, I think I'll transition a bit to closing out TechCast Days.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Dan.
All right, let me get out of here and find the deck.